My father once taught me that the most effective way of inflicting change is through the pocketbook. In previous videos, we've seen that there are externalized costs regarding the meat industry. Externalized costs are the opposite of internalized costs and are the costs that you do not pay for when you originally buy a product. For example, chewing gums impose externalized costs on society, as most of them will end up on the streets or on their tables where they need to get removed by a cleaner. Before we go further though, I would like to thank the sponsor of this video, QualityGains.com. QualityGains is helping vegans lose fat or gain muscle in a step-by-step process, and you can get a risk-free 7-day trial of your personalized coaching service by clicking the link down below. And yes, Quality Gains is myself. That is my service. So anyway, David Robinson Simon, a business lawyer and author of the book Meatonomics, writes, "The hidden costs associated with animal foods are about the same as all state and federal spending on Medicaid, or about $20 billion more than Russia's annual government budget. However, you look at this number, it is huge, $414 billion. While the majority of the costs are healthcare related, there are subsidies, cruelty and environmental costs that fill a good chart of the pie of cost. And 414 billion are essentially costs that we as taxpayers and citizens are already paying. The question is not then from where do we get the money, but how do we end up distributing it? One way of realigning the costs is through a meat tax, and this may even be achieved until 2030, and there are signs that the government is planning to do that right now. Here are 3 questions that you will learn the answer for today. Number 1, is taxing meat effective? Number 2, how hard should we tax? And number 3, why do we do that until 2030? Number 1, is taxing meat effective? In the United States, cigarettes are getting taxed at the federal, state and even city level. In New York City, a pack of cigarettes selling for $11 is secretly containing taxes in the amount of $5.85. And as you might guess, these taxes do work. Some studies show that just a 10% cigarette tax reduces the consumption by 4 to 15%. On the other hand, meat taxes also obviously increase tax revenues. 2007, in Texas, a cigarette tax hike of $1 per pack increased state tax revenue in the first year by more than $1 billion, while lowering cigarette sales in the state by 21%. While there were multiple factors influencing the decline of overall cigarette consumption over the years, we can conclude by comparing the US with other countries with no US regulatory style that taxes are the most important part of any anti-smoking campaign. In Mexico, for example, new tobacco taxes imposed between 1981 and 2007 led to cigarette prices tripling and consumption dropping by half. The Surgeon General report on smoking, the official document of professionals claiming for the first time that smoking was bad for you, was hugely beneficial in minimizing tobacco consumption, and so are the restrictions in advertising. But what really seems to move the needle when it comes to behavior change is a hole in the pocketbook. Number 2, how hard should we tax? Cigarettes in the US are getting taxed by an average of 72%. Regarding the externalized cost of animal food consumption, healthcare, subsidies and other costs that lead to over $400 billion, a tax of 50% on meat, fish, eggs and dairy is feasible and realistic. To put this simple, now a $2 burger will cost $3. A $10 steak at the supermarket will cost $15 to buy. Contrary to popular belief, people will not go hungry. Every American taxpayer will get a yearly tax credit averaging $500, and this includes the 44% of Americans that are not paying federal income taxes. While this will cost the government $78 billion, the meat tax will not only cover this cost, it will also put some good money in the pocket of the government. Why? Patience, fellow soyman or woman. Patience. Let's look at the numbers. A meat tax of 50% will cut US consumption approximately in half, and therefore, if you eliminate the government subsidies, save the US nearly $200 billion. We could expect results like these: 172,000 fewer annual deaths of humans from cancer, diabetes and heart disease. 26 billion fewer land and sea animal deaths. These are 87 deaths that every American could prevent each year by halving their meat consumption. 3.4 trillion pound reduction in annual emission of carbon dioxide equivalents. This is such a huge reduction that the same effect could only be achieved by forcing every American to sell their cars and walk everywhere they go. Plus, forcing all people that use boats for personal and even commercial reasons to start using motorless Viking longboats instead. A change by the meat tax would also include a reduction of 440 billion pounds less waste per year. And this is awesome. Less should always be welcomed by the public. 566,000 square miles of extra space would be created. This is 1/6 of the United States, which would no longer be used for animal land or their feeding. Yep, this is the size twice of Texas. On top of that, this would put additional 32 billion in the pockets of the US government due to taxes that can be invested in helping farmers and the industry who raise the animals. That's, by the way, what we did with the tobacco industry in 2004, and we can do this again. Number 3. Why until 2030? There are 4 reasons a meat tax in the next 10 years will be likely. Number 1. Economic competition. China is currently working on reducing its meat consumption by 50% until 2030. While its main focus is on improving dietary patterns by enforcing governmental regulations, a meat tax will be likely to occur. Why does this matter? Currently, China and the US are in a head-on economic trade war. Both sides are interested in increasing economic output and maximizing their efficiency to stay competitive. If China is reducing their per capita consumption and therefore minimizing their costs, the US probably needs to do that too. It's as if you had 2 shops on the same street and one shop is suddenly increasing the work week of their employees to 50 hours a week legally. The other shop simply has to do that too to stay competitive. Number 2. Massive federal debt. Another reason is the federal debt of the United States. On 11th of February 2019, it exceeded 22 trillion. This is more than the economic output of the US in a year, and this understandably worries investors, as it is a sign that the country is probably not able to repay the money anytime soon. To put this in comparison, in 1988, the debt was only half of America's annual economic output. One of the most pain-free ways of increasing the debt payback would be to tax an industry that is creating a ton of externalized costs. Number 3. Climate change. While I am a huge fan of Elon Musk's work to advance the transition to sustainable energy with the Tesla company, a full-fledged change of the market in the US will likely not be possible until 2030. We need to start other measurements, and we need to do this now. The safe level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is 350 parts per million. We're currently over 400 parts per million. This is the highest point of atmospheric CO2 in all of human existence. And if we're continuing to go down that path, our grandkids will actually get the feeling of drowsiness just by playing outside. I mean, on the rare occasions they're actually capable of playing outside and are not dealing with debilitating heat waves or cyclones or typhoons or wildfires. Number 4. Plant-based meats. Paul Bashir was right when he said that we're in a transitional period.
This is just funny to me. We're in a transitional period, you know what I'm saying?
Especially when it comes to economics. While the global plant-based meat market was valued at $4 billion in 2017, the company Beyond Meat alone just recently hit the value of $10 billion. Impossible Food, the manufacturer of Impossible Burgers, achieved a value of $2 billion in 2019. While this still pales to the meat industry, which is valued at $1 trillion, it is a sign that we're moving in a different direction. I mean, Beyond Meat and Impossible Burgers were almost non-existent 5 years ago, and just in this year, Beyond Meat's valuation tripled. While taxing animal foods would have meant huge job losses 5 years ago and massive compromises in our eating behavior, we could deal with it way more easily in 2019. Conclusion: if our slave trade be gone, there's an end to our lives. Beggars all we must be, our children and wives. This was a line from a British song after the government was making moves to ban the slave trade 200 years ago. Sometimes social, moral, and economic progress can mean temporary discomfort for a chosen few. But I think it's less uncomfortable than we think. I mean, take a look at the quote of Caldwell Esselstyn, a heart surgeon.
With the Western diet, there are going to be 500,000 people in this country this year who will have to have the front half of their body divided, their heart exposed. Some people would call that extreme.
On top of that, a lot of people that work in the animal industry would welcome a change of jobs. In factory farms, employees are twice as likely to suffer a workplace injury and are suffering from psychological stress. Also, racism is a significant issue in slaughterhouses, not only in self-segregating cafeterias or locker rooms, but in the way the work is done. Whites get the best job, which is supervision, Native Americans do warehouse work, blacks are on the kill floor, and Mexicans are butchering at the bottom. Farming soybeans would be a welcome change for a worker that used to slit throats. The mission of this YouTube channel is to put veganism across the goal line. If you want to help us achieve that, like and subscribe to this channel, and don't forget to hit the bell icon. Let's make food production great again.